And so, critics rated t.s.m, and welcome back to my channel. As you can hear, the lawnmower is now going outside, but I figured maybe I'll try to film this anyway because I want it to be outside, and also because of the fact that when I came out here, I had sprayed myself with a bunch of Victoria's Secret bombshell perfume to keep the bugs away. Because if you didn't know, it's almost as effective as DEET is at keeping mosquitoes and other little critters away. It's a really bad perfume. I don't recommend buying it if you just want to buy a Victoria's Secret perfume. At least in my opinion, it's Victoria's Secret's most popular perfume, but I just don't like it really at all. But all in all, it'll be useful in the house kind of because there's a mosquito in my house. But enough of my rambling. On to the topic at hand. So in the last video, I talked about 5 issues that I had with Korea that I feel as though other people have. Well, at least I've talked about it with other people, but no one is talking about. And this is mainly issues that, foreigners have living in Korea, and maybe even Koreans too, to some degree. But today I want to talk about overcoming the first issue which was the most important issue to me, is overcoming losing your preventing losing your identity while you live in Korea. So let's hop right into this topic. As I came up with the last video, 5 issues that I have in Korea, I have 5 tips and tricks to prevent yourself from losing your identity. If you didn't watch my last video, go watch it after you watch this one. But if you didn't watch my last video, then in a nutshell, the reason why foreigners losing their identity is the most important issue to me is because a lot of times I feel as though people are under the impression that they have to change or become someone new rather than staying the same. So the number one trick, or rather tip, I guess this is not really tricks, tip that I have to prevent that from happening to you is remind yourself of your core values. The core values that you had going into Korea are not necessarily the core values that you should have coming out of Korea. That said, you need to remember the things that are super important to you from the culture that you grew up in. Things that you don't want to change, things that you like, versus the things in Korea. For example, if you live in the Midwest or anywhere else in the US that helping people is important, don't stop helping people just because Koreans don't do it. I know where I live, it's not important and you shouldn't do it, and I highly recommend if you come to Philadelphia that you don't help people because it's not safe to, and people do pretend to need help just so that they can harm you or do other really crazy things that have happened to people that help people in Philadelphia. But if that's not the case where you live, and especially since Korea is a safe place, and you see an ajumma, ajushi, halmoni, haraboji falling and getting hurt, which will happen, especially if they're running for the subway, then help them. If they reject your help or don't like the fact that you're helping them or act confused, then it's their loss. You don't have to help them any further than what they've allowed you to already do. That said, if they do thank you or do appreciate it, then you've done something right. Okay, so don't compromise your core values, and if your core values change, let it be something that you would be okay. Let it be a core value that you would be okay with having, not something that you don't like having, like the fact that you only help. In Korea, collectivism is really not about everyone is together. It's really about helping the people that you know and love, not strangers. Second tip that I have is remind yourself how long you're going to be there. If you don't plan on being in Korea beyond 5 years, then that to me means you only plan on being there for the short term, which means that you don't need to just make this whole life change become just like Koreans. I mean, you should never want to become like that, even if you've been there for 20 years. Okay, obviously you're going to change and adapt and become a new and different person over time, but you don't need to just make yourself into a Korean, especially since Koreans are not perfect. Korean culture is not perfect any more than US or any other country's culture is perfect. There are some habits that you'll need to get rid of, but it doesn't mean to change your whole personality. There are some personality traits that are part of your works of progress that you need to get rid of. But again, don't just trash all the good parts for the sake of I want to be like Koreans. No, that's that's not healthy, and 2, that's going to lead into my third point as to why is a tip as to prevent yourself from losing your identity. The third tip that I have is remind yourself that you're always going to be a foreigner. Now, I'm not trying to discourage people from moving there by saying like you're always going to be different. I think this is actually a good thing The fact that you're always going to be a foreigner means that you're always going to be different, which means that you can, to a degree, get away with certain things. You can get away with wearing certain styles, wearing certain clothes, buying certain things, or acting in certain ways because you're not Korean. And Koreans will never expect you to necessarily be perfect. That said, Koreans will, over time, especially the longer you've been there and the longer you've known people that live there, they will have higher expectations for you in terms of speaking the language fluently or knowing all the cultural customs and nuances and things like that. But because you are a foreigner and you're always going to be seen as other, you're not put at the same standard or expectation as being as Korean as other people, as Koreans who've lived there their entire lives and are ethnically Korean. So remind yourself, you're always gonna be a foreigner, and it's okay to be different, and you are allowed to be different. The fourth thing that I suggest you do is build relationships with people who are also from your country. This is a great way to prevent yourself from losing your identity, because you don't want yourself to just feel like who you are is being drowned out just because you live in another country or you're only hanging out with Koreans. It's definitely not a good idea to just only hang out with Koreans. You need other people who can relate to your struggles, which is why they should be from your home country, preferably, because different foreigners are going to have different struggles due to different cultural differences. But going to the International Home Church in Sarang was a great way for me, because connecting on a spiritual level, finding people of all different ages and people who actually did stay there for long term or had different reasons why they came or were doing different things, was just a great way for me to have that foreigner community. Also, knowing Hannah, who also went to Yonsei, who we had a lot of similarities, who we both don't want to be teachers when we go back to Korea, who both of us want to get into the entertainment business and have more long-term plans for Korea, is the reason as to why it was great for me to hang out with her, especially in the sense that we connected a lot when we went to the Jimjilbang, which is something that I feel is about being nude around other people and having that sense of closeness with somebody is definitely a great way to build relationships with the people from your country. And the final way that I suggest you prevent from losing your identity as a whole is definitely talk to friends and family from home. Some people just forget about their friends and family from home or just act like they don't exist, and definitely don't do that, okay, unless you don't have any. I guess, there are always extenuating circumstances, but I definitely would try to talk to, either call or text my grandma every day, because of the fact that, I miss my grandma. And I also talk to my friends as well, at times, because there's the mere fact that, hey, when you're away from home for so long, sometimes you can maybe forget some of the things that you miss, or forget some of the things that make you you, or that are actually good about you, not the bad things, hopefully. So when you connect with those people and you remember that, hey, they do exist, and hey, we are, I am who I am, and it's okay that I don't have to change, then that's definitely a great way to remember. That's a great way to not lose your identity and not just become just this totally different person. You don't have to talk to them all the time, okay? But definitely, if you don't talk to them all the time, definitely make sure that you have a good community around you that is from the same country as you, and definitely do a good job of having lots of Korean friends as well, because you can go find Americans when you go find people from the U.S. when you go back to the U.S. You don't have to be around people from the U.S. all the time, but do those things to just try to make sure that you don't lose who you are entirely.